Diaz. I'm the Chief Patient Officer at Medtronic Diabetes. Hope everyone is having a great day. I'm here today with Dr. Steve Miller, endocrinologist and diabetologist at Stony Brook University. And by the way, his name is not Steve Miller. His name is Dr. Miller, Josh Miller, to his family. So just to make things out right. But I'm here with Dr. Miller because he has a unique perspective on diabetes. He's not only a doctor, but he is a patient. And so we're going to spend a few moments talking to him about the state of diabetes care in the US. We're also going to talk about his perspectives when he talks and speaks with patients, some real conversations. We're also going to talk about pumps and when is it appropriate to recommend a pump and when it is not. And finally, we're going to be talking to Dr. Miller about the MiniMed 670G system, the first hybrid closed loop. And he uses the MiniMed 670, so it'll be really interesting to get his experiences. But before we go there, I want to start by asking you about yourself, your hobbies, your family, and your real name.
Sure. Louis, thanks for having me. So you can call me whatever you want, but if you call me Joshua, it means I'm in trouble and my mother's yelling at me. So I'm a diabetologist. I grew up on Long Island where my family still lives with me. I'm a native of New York. I've never left the state of New York. I spent some time in Rochester and in New York City, moved back out to Long Island a few years ago. I have a beautiful family and a wonderful wife, two young boys and a young girl, Freya, Brendan and Henry. I've been practicing endocrinology now for about the last 6 or 7 years. And I wear multiple hats. As you said, I help to care for patients with diabetes. I am a patient with diabetes for about 19 years now. I'm also a musician. I play the double bass. That's how I met my wife, who's a flutist and a pianist.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what brought us together 19 years ago as well. So we have that to share. But I'm delighted to be here and to meet all the wonderful people at Medtronic and to learn about what you're doing and to share my experiences with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming by. I know you've got diabetes, so sleep is always a concern, but you also have a young baby.
Yes.
How are you managing both of those challenges?
I have a wife who is an absolute saint, and I could not be luckier to have Ellen in my life. She's amazing. But yeah, we have a 6-month-old baby, Freya. She's a redhead, so I'm in trouble, of course. But it's a challenge. Sleep, wake, stress, life of living with diabetes and having a young family and working and being a professional is not easy for someone without diabetes. Certainly adding a layer of diabetes to that adds a layer of complexity that I have to deal with on a regular basis. But I have a family that loves me and supports me. I have a physician and a team that supports me. I have colleagues that provide help and support me. I'm very, very lucky to be doing what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Now, one interesting aspect about your life is that you do volunteer a lot of time. You go around the world. You've recently were in China. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the care system for diabetes in China and contrast that a little bit with the US.
Sure. So I returned in December as a visiting professor in Eastern China. We were in a rural part of Eastern China, about 3 or so hours out of Beijing. And I'll tell you, it was an amazing, amazing experience, both as an academician, endocrinologist, but as a patient, as a person with diabetes. Offered me a lot of perspective on my life with diabetes, my experiences with diabetes, and what challenges people with the disease face, whether they're in China or the US or anyone, anywhere on earth. There are shared experiences no matter what language you speak. And speaking to patients in China who are trying to manage diabetes with the infrastructure there, contrasting that with some of the resources we have available here, I came back with just a tremendous appreciation for our healthcare system, the team that I have supporting me, my insulin pump, my sensor, and I've drawn on both of my trips to China at this point to help inform my conversations with patients and honestly to help me deal with my own challenges as a patient a little bit better. So it was a really, really eye-opening experience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. And I'm sure you had interesting conversations speaking to your colleagues in China, with your patients in China, but you're pretty much a straight shooter when it comes to talking to your patients. You're pretty real in the conversations that you have. Talk to us a little bit about how do you approach patients? What's your philosophy? What's important to you? How do you engage patients with diabetes?
Sure. So I may be the first to say it on a live Facebook video, but having diabetes sucks, right? There's no, it's not a fun disease to have, but my approach is generally to help patients appreciate the reality of living with a chronic disease and recognizing that diabetes should not define who we are. In my practice, in my academic life, in my day-to-day life, I don't like using the word diabetic as a noun or even as an adjective. I am a person who happens to have diabetes. I am a doctor who happens to have diabetes. Helping patients to understand that diabetes is something that they have to live with, that should not define who they are on a daily basis, is really important and forms the basis for many of my conversations with patients. And then the most important thing that I stress with patients, with their significant others and family members, is quality of life with the disease. It's important to know what your A1C is, and it's important to focus on blood sugars and avoiding lows and highs and everything in between. But if your quality of life living with the disease is a challenge, and if you're faced with the struggles of managing your diabetes on a daily basis, it will overcome you, and it will take over your day-to-day and will cause a ton of angst and stress, and will prevent you from being able to achieve the goals that are important to you. I would add that I tend to ask every patient what their goals are, what their aspirations are. As a physician, I have my agenda. I need to focus on blood sugar and cholesterol and blood pressure and all these very important objective data points. But oftentimes what I value for a patient as their goals is a far cry from what they are experiencing at that point in their life. So asking patients what they would like out of their visit, out of their care, out of their relationship with me and in their diabetes is probably the most valuable tool I have to journey with them to improve their diabetes management overall.
Dr. Miller, I've heard you talk about putting patients at the center, putting patients first, and treating patients as real people. And there's a long time between visits to a doctor. And you talk a lot about empowering the patient to take care of themselves. Talk a little bit more about what the patient should be doing for themselves.
Sure. So, I tell my patients all the time, you are not just a number. I don't really focus as much on A1C, although hemoglobin A1C is important, and it's one of but many data points we use to help people manage their diabetes. But as an endocrinologist, I see patients once every 3, once every 6 months, even once a year. Sometimes it's challenging to get in. And so it's not as much important what the patient is doing with me in that 20-minute visit in the office as much as it is what they're doing at home to help manage their disease. So oftentimes I'll come up with goals for the weeks and months following our visit for patients to work on their own when it comes to figuring out the effects, for instance, that foods have on your blood sugars, exercise, stress, living with diabetes, to help inform patients that they have control over their disease. I have control over my disease. I love my endocrinologist dearly. She's wonderful, but at the end of the day, my blood sugar control is my responsibility. And I think it's really valuable to give patients tools to work on in the interceding months to get to a better place when they do come back and see you. And then you start that next visit. Josh, how have you been doing since your last visit? How did you figure out those high blood sugars at night after your dinner time meals? Or how did you figure out your mid-afternoon lows? What do you think is the cause of that? Patients will rise to the occasion, and most patients with diabetes know more about their diabetes than anyone else on the planet, I myself included. And it's important to allow patients the opportunity to draw on that knowledge and to help problem solve for themselves with a little bit of support and help from the medical community.
Yeah, I love the idea that that with your help, with other doctors' help, the patient can really take control, know their body, know what diabetes means to them and how it reacts, and just really be better prepared to manage and be better prepared to have great conversations when they come to visit you. And I think that's helpful. Now, we're a little short on some of the tools to help patients really walk into your office and have a conversation, but you kind of take an approach to give them a little homework, make them think through their meals, their sleep, and just come better prepared, really.
So right, what an amazing time to be alive with diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And we have people living for decades without any complications from their disease. And what an amazing time to have resources available to manage one's own diabetes and to learn more about their diabetes as time proceeds. We have glucose sensors and insulin pumps and meters and Bluetooth, and it's just, technology is moving at a mile a minute. And my overall philosophy in terms of utilizing technology is, how will this device, how will this machine help the patient live a better life with their diabetes? Yes, how will it affect their blood sugars? How will it affect their overall time in range and glycemic control, things of this nature? But my goal is, how will this device help you live with diabetes? How will this technology impact your day-to-day? And then how can we build on that to help you to achieve your goals?
Yeah, yeah. Now, Medtronic is a company that's developing solutions for all types of patients, type 1, type 2, lots of different therapies, lots of different devices. But one device that we're clearly known for is the MiniMed series of pumps. And when is it right for a patient to consider a pump? What type of patient? And then just the journey of that it takes to get to a pump. Talk a little bit about how you think about it.
Sure. So, looking back on my time and journey on insulin pump therapy, I was your prototypical patient, where my endocrinologist at the time, who is now a dear friend, he said, Josh, you got to think about insulin pump therapy. It's going to help your quality of life, help you with stress, getting through medical school. And I was, and still am, very stubborn, and I wasn't the most compliant patient, to use sort of an older word. And it took some time thinking about and digesting the notion of an insulin pump. Patients are challenged with the notion of being attached to their diabetes, to have a device that sort of symbolizes their diabetes. But for me personally, I got to a point where I realized that it was just a device that helped me to conquer my diabetes, and to help me take my diabetes and tuck it away and put it in my pocket. And that sort of that feeling of safety and security has played a big role in my utilization of pumps. So when I talk with patients about what possibilities are out there and sort of what items are on the market that you can think about, what are things that I might be able to offer you to help you get control of your diabetes and your quality of life, every patient is unique. So I don't personally use strict criteria for when a patient would be a pump candidate, for instance. There has to be some baseline understanding of what diabetes and what diabetes is and how you manage it. And trust me, there is a steep learning curve to traverse when you start an insulin pump and when you're engaging with it and learning how to incorporate it in your day-to-day. But again, I think it's a matter of setting reasonable goals for your patients. If we utilize pump therapy, what are your goals? How can I help you achieve them? Here are my goals. How can we work together to achieve them? It's just an amazing time to have access to what we have access to these days. And the future is also really exciting to think about. So.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you also talk about that our healthcare system sometimes moves sideways and forward and backwards, and it takes a lot of effort, though, to consider a pump, get a doctor that will help you with the pump. And then there's the whole healthcare system, insurance payers, and how do you get involved and help a patient through the journey to get?
So, once I've had a couple of meaningful conversations with the patient about insulin pump therapy, CGM, sensor therapy, and the like, it's important to set realistic expectations about what that journey in the beginning may entail. We have a healthcare system that sometimes can be broken, and getting people access to those devices can be a challenge, working with their insurance companies, their other physicians as a team to get them where they need to be. And it is frustrating. And I am exceedingly blessed to have very good health insurance where I can get access to devices that will help me live a longer life, God willing, with diabetes. It's helping patients to navigate those potential pitfalls, and helping them know that we are there to support them. We are there to get them access to what they need, and they have a team of clinicians and providers behind them to support them in that journey. But if you were to ask me what is one of the top frustrating aspects of being a patient with diabetes now, and what is the most frustrating aspect of being a physician and a diabetologist, it's navigating that landscape and helping getting patients access to those devices and that technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that not only with the help of you and your team, and we'd like to think that Medtronic has a tremendous team that can help you navigate through that journey to get whatever the device that we offer. But you've been on that journey. You've tried lots of things. I think one of the fascinating things is, as a doctor as well as a patient, you've tried lots of devices. And just more recently, you've had a chance to get on the MiniMed 670G system, the pump, the sensor, the algorithm that makes it all work, SmartGuard. And tell us a little bit what motivated you to try. And it's not like you necessarily jumped up and down, but you were kind of curious and you went through a thought process of why this made sense and you were curious.
So as I said, I love my endocrinologist, and she's always been very proactive in sharing with me what's on the horizon and what opportunities there are to consider in managing my diabetes. And I make it a point as a diabetologist of trying each technology as it comes to market, different insulin pumps, different sensors, even different meters, just to see what my patients may be experiencing when they're using the device. I think it's informative. It's being able to understand what a patient is discussing when they're bringing their challenges to me, and to know what they may be experiencing at home using the device. So my endocrinologist had mentioned the 670 coming to market, and some of its capabilities and why it might work for me. I ignored her suggestion for a few months and thought about it, and then patients started to ask me about it. I started doing some more reading, and I finally decided to give it a try. My blood sugar control had been reasonably good, and things were sort of on an even keel, but I thought to myself, why not shake things up a little bit and see what the hype is all about. So I've been wearing it now for, I want to say about 6-7 months, and I really like it. It's helped improve my quality of life. I haven't focused as much on my A1C, but for me personally, one of my biggest fears as a patient, certainly as a doctor, but as a patient, is fear of low blood sugars. I haven't had as many low blood sugars, and it's worked out well for me. I like the sensor and the data that it provides me. I can look down at my pump before I go in to see a patient and know what my blood sugar is, so that I know that I'm going to be stable where I need to be while I'm helping people take care of themselves. It's a good device. There are some challenges, and it is an amazing device, and it's the best we have thus far. And it sort of being here today and talking with your team and learning about what's on the horizon, I'm really excited to see what comes. But the 670 has been really great for me as a patient, and my patients have enjoyed using it as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I would like you to talk a little bit about the Guardian sensor. A lot of folks are like, Medtronic as a sensor, and it works. And I know that was also in the back of your mind, and you went through a process of trying out the Guardian sensor, comparing versus other sensors, and sounds like you ended up trusting it almost. So tell me a little bit about the Guardian sensor.
So with any continuous glucose monitor, I think for patients and their physicians, it's important to be able to trust the data that you have in front of you. And I had some rocky experiences in my time with diabetes using different devices. And so I approached the Guardian and the 670 with some trepidation. I said, it's supposed to be a really good sensor, but do I really need this right now? Is it going to give me more of a headache than it's worth, et cetera, et cetera? But I begrudgingly tried it. And I was checking my sugars really regularly to make sure that the numbers were accurate, probably more frequently than I've ever checked my blood sugars before. And I was surprised. My expectations were met, forgetting as a physician, as a patient. And I looked down at the sensor data and knew that I could trust it. And that, to me, forms the foundation of everything else I might want to do with the system and with the pump. When you have trustworthy data and actionable data, as I've said, then the sky's the limit as to how you can help patients to manage their insulin therapy and their pump settings and whatnot. I really like the sensor. I really do.
Thank you. Now, you've told us a little bit about what the MiniMed 670G, the whole system has done for you, Guardian sensor, the pump. tell us a little bit about what it's done for your family with all of the young kids and your wife and just life in general.
Sure.
What you can count on, what you can trust. How has it helped you?
I love my wife. We've been married 11 years together, 19, but I hate waking her up in the middle of the night, right? And there is a degree of guilt associated with waking up your significant other in the middle of the night with a critical blood sugar or an alarm on a sensor, what have you. We haven't been waking up as much. My nighttime experiences have been much easier. I've been sleeping better, and I've been hearing that from patients, that it sort of alleviates some of that stress about what my blood sugar will do overnight. That, for me personally, has been probably the biggest change. What's happening when I'm not awake and in blissful sleep, which as a physician and as a parent of 3 young kids is always a challenge to achieve. And then certainly with 3 young kids, I need my blood sugars to be manageable and under control for as much time as possible, both in the short term to be a good dad and, God willing, in the long term to be around for my kids. So it's peace of mind for me as a parent. My wife likes the notion of having reliable data and knowing that I'm in a better place with my diabetes. My endocrinologist likes knowing that I'm in a better place and have more reliable data. So it's affected many aspects of my life for the positive. So.
Thank you for that. So we've talked a little bit about care in China and the U.S. We've talked about empowering patients with diabetes and the importance of quality of life. You kind of took us a little bit on a journey on pump. When is it important to consider and what it takes to get to a pump? You're now described to us a little bit of your experience of MiniMed 670G, Guardian sensor, what it means to you and to your life. I know you take a look at the data, patient data. We use the CareLink system. I'm sure you're familiar. Talk to us a little bit about how is CareLink kind of helping you manage your patients and helping your patients to have a really good conversation.
Sure. So I would say as valuable as the blood sugar management itself is the data that the system provides. To me as a physician and being able to look back over the previous couple of weeks and months to see where people's numbers have been, what their patterns are, et cetera, but more so in providing data that I can then share with the patient as actionable data, as I call it. So there are 3 or 4 pages in the CareLink report that I always go to all the time, and one of them is a sensor tracing. I love looking at the overlay, and then I turn it around and I show it to the patient. And before I offer my thoughts and interpretation, I'll ask the patient, Josh, what do you think is going on here? And I'm always surprised as to how introspective and informative and thoughtful patients are about interpreting their own data. Well, gosh, when I look at that pattern, maybe I need to take a little bit more insulin with dinner, or maybe I need to cut down my carb intake with dinner, or spread out my carb intake throughout the day. So I find CareLink reports to be useful for the physician, of course, but we're now at a point in time where we can share that data with patients and their family members so that they understand how to make changes for themselves that may have a positive impact. And that's pretty cool. And again, as we discussed earlier, I think that provides patients with resources for those in-between visit months where they can think about that tracing and say, I'm going to work on that nighttime sugar. And I'm excited to go back and have my download in 3 or 6 months to see if I was able to make positive change.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So we're kind of at the end of our conversation, but I'm sure you've got a final message to send out to all the patients out there. A lot of people are considering, is pump right for me? Some are even considering the MiniMed 670G system. But in general, what's kind of your biggest advice for a patient with diabetes? Sure. and life, sure. how to deal with it?
So I have the pleasure of having had many mentors in my life and friends in years past who have guided me and helped me in my successful journey with diabetes. And so one of my mentors years ago told me, and has told her patients over the years, that you don't have to be an A+ student to conquer diabetes. B- will suffice. I wasn't an A+ student in medical school. Don't tell my patients that. But if you're engaged with your diabetes and you share your goals with your physician and your care team and your spouses and significant others and family members, and have shared goal setting, I think that for me as a patient, that for me as a physician has probably been the most important and valuable advice I can give my patients is set reasonable goals for yourself. Being a B- student is okay, and you'll get where you need to be. It may be challenging from time to time, but there is a community of support to help you achieve your goals, and you're not going it alone. So that's what I would say.
Well, we've had a great time with you. I know you've met with lots of our teams. You're helping with ideas, with suggestions on how to make diabetes easier, simpler to manage, to control, and to help all patients out there. We appreciate you spending the time with us. We appreciate all of you at home to spend the time with us. And I want to say thank you and remind you to go to Medtronic Diabetes to look up our important safety information about our devices. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thanks, Louis.
We will see you again, and thank you, everyone.